Our next speaker, Maria Speck, is getting mic'd up right now. She's an award-winning author of Ancient Grains for Modern Meals and Simply Ancient Grains. She's a Whole Grains Council culinary advisor. She was raised in both Greece and Germany and has a lifelong passion for whole grains simply because of the flavor. To Maria and many others, the real motivation for using whole grains is flavor, with nutrition just a lucky side bonus. So today, Maria is going to highlight the creative potential of adding whole grains to menus, along with intriguing details of how whole grains can make menu planning more efficient and more profitable while reducing the environmental footprint of food service operations. Welcome, Maria, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I need that. Wonderful.
You can come up here if you wish, or stay down.
Yeah, it's good down here, but I just need to occasionally take a glance at my notes. I hope not too often. So is anyone timing? Let me see. Also, yeah, you are. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, Sarah. I'm honored to be here and talk about a true lifelong passion for whole grains. And I always say I was very lucky. I was raised in Germany and Greece by a German dad and a Greek mother, and no one ever lifted a wagging finger and said to me, "You better eat your healthy whole grains." Instead, they were just part of our everyday meals. If any one of you has traveled to Germany, I'm sure you're familiar with the country's amazing centuries-old bread tradition, whole grain breads, dark crusty loaves. If you've been to Greece, we eat bulgur, we eat wheat berries, we cherish barley rusk, which is having also a huge comeback in Greece. So we really, truly have this food on our table to this day. And so I'm a journalist by training. I worked for Germany's largest news agency and came to Stanford as a night fellow. And I was working, writing, and whenever I went to a party and told people that I eat whole grains, inevitably I would get a rather pitiful look. And people would say to me, "Oh, you must eat very healthy," to which I never knew what to say. In fact, it was just something I just couldn't. So eventually I noticed that people in America where I lived, where I fell in love and married, people were getting interested in whole grains, and I thought, well, that's what I do. At home, that's what I've not used all-purpose flour since I was 11 years old, and for baking, and I've had whole grains, all my life. So I said, if I know anything, I know that. So I started writing about it, thinking about it, and eventually, I think after 10 years of doing that, I wrote Ancient Grains for Modern Meals, which came out in 2011. And what I wanted to do with this book is really highlight in each recipe how the flavor, the texture, and even the color of grains can actually enhance how you eat, can bring incredible variety to your table. And so rather than talking about healthy food, so let's see if we can get that going. So we can talk, for example, about color. Grains bring amazing color to your table. There is two ways. You can either color your grains. This is what I've done in this recipe, a burgundy bulgur with blueberries and orange blossom water. It's a very simple super breakfast porridge. It uses bulgur, which is a Mediterranean grain that I love. It's super quick cooking. So I color the bulgur here with pomegranate juice. You can also use cranberry juice, and then it's just a simple topping of yogurt, honey, and some blueberries or pomegranate, whatever you want. So what that shows, trust me, every recipe in my books, actually talking of kids, I don't know if Anne is still here, every recipe in my kids, if the kids, I don't have children, but the kids of my friends, they had all the recipes, and if there was not, out of 9 out of 10, it would not go either back to the drawing board or it would not go in the book. I mean, this is the kind of recipe testing that was really important to me, and I agree with her entirely. Children do eat whole grains, but never say healthy to them, because then you have the wagging finger again. So this is one example where I color a grain. There is another example where a grain brings an incredible, stunning color to your table. This is, again, a porridge, and this is slightly sweetened. This is a cardamom-infused black rice porridge, again with blueberries and pistachios, which give a nice color. This is using black rice, which turns purple when you cook it. Now imagine a Thanksgiving, and you make a savory rice dish, and you put this on the Thanksgiving table. It's soft-textured, beautiful rice. There is no one that's going to ask if this is healthy or going to complain about it, as long as you don't tell them you're putting it there, again, because it's healthy. Now, I want to also the topic comes up of flavor. Everyone is probably familiar with natural sweetness of oats, rye. Have you had rye? The beautiful natural tanginess of rye. Obviously, as a German, half German, I'm supremely biased because rye is in all our beautiful dark breads, or in many of them. And rye actually has something that I love and remember loving when I was very small, 5 or 6 years old, in pumpernickel. The real German pumpernickel is 2 ingredients. It's rye and water. And in a very slow steam oven, over 24 hours, it's transformed into something that's so sweet. That's what happens to rye when you do it right and without any, colors, coffee, or whatever we've used here to, make sometimes all-purpose flour become into a pumpernickel in America. And so I remember as a child chewing on this pumpernickel and releasing all the sweetness in my mouth, and I was almost embarrassed to talk about it. I liked it so much. And many years later, when I wrote about it, I remembered that as a kid, how incredibly, what an experience that was. And that shows what flavors grains can have and what impact they have if you consciously, I was like 5 or 6 when my grandmother made me a slice of pumpernickel with butter. I mean, that was it, right? And that did it, I guess, for me. I don't know. And so you have rye, which is slightly tangy. Buckwheat, many of you are familiar with the earthy flavor of buckwheat. We have a grain that's not hugely trending. I use it here, for example. I use the cracked grain of frike. Is everyone familiar with frike? Have you had it perhaps at a restaurant? So it's a smoked wheat. It comes, it's eaten actually in the Middle East, made from durum wheat. It's harvested, it's green, it's raw wheat that's harvested raw, and then basically parched over fire so that you remove the outer husk and the hard parts of the grain, and you make the grain edible. Now, how did that happen? Well, in Germany, the story that we say, because we have that as well, we call it Grünkern, which is in Germany traditionally made from spelt. Germany is notoriously rainy. So farmers ended up with a bad harvest. That's what I believe is the reason why we have Grünkern, and it's probably also in the Middle East, so no fancy stories or anything. I think it's just survival. Again, farmers figured out when they couldn't mature and ripen their wheat or their spelt or their grain, that they basically, by toasting it and parching it, that they get actually something supremely delicious. I mean, the Grünkern in Germany, the smokiness, we use it in vegetarian burgers. It's just going to blow you away, right? And we actually have a source for German Grünkern in the US. We also, of course, have now US-grown frike. I can talk about this if people want to know. So there's a lot happening. Frike is wonderful, especially when it's cracked, because this cooks in 15 minutes. I use it here in a soup with lentils, lots of vegetables, and then I top it. This is great for guests with spicy harissa shrimp. This is the spicy chili paste from North Africa. And I put some dates, which adds like a hint of sweetness. So you're getting a meal that's hugely impressive. It's really ready in 20 minutes, So this is the kind of cooking that I do. I'm a home cook. I mentioned I was a journalist. All my life there were whole grains on my table. So it's not something, that I learned how to do that. But it's not something that's hard to do. So I talked about the flavor and the color. Texture. Well, to every party to this day that I go, people will say, well, yeah, but it's so chewy. And I'm like, no. If you know your grains. I'm a comfort food lover. I love potatoes. I love all kinds of comfort food like oatmeal, polenta. I love millet. These are all absolute. They can all be made into supremely comforting dishes and are not at all chewy. There are chewy whole grains, such as wheat berries, spelt that I mentioned, or rye berries. But there is a whole spectrum of textures. Quinoa now, obviously, we're all familiar with, is somewhere in the middle. So is brown rice. But so if you like comforting grains, there's a lot of choices for you. So you're not stuck. Now here I use one that has a lot of texture. Admittedly, it's one that's beautiful that I love. Kamut. This is has a rich buttery texture. Has the kernels about 2 to 3 times the size of wheat. It's an ancient wheat variety, and it has a beautiful bronze color. And here it's served in a very super simple salad again. I mean, just with some toasted walnuts, oranges, a bit of gorgonzola or blue cheese, whatever you want, and leeks. So very simple, a marinade, a dressing with olive oil, honey, and lemon. So there's nothing, I mean, all the cooking I do, I'm not a trained chef, I'm a home cook, but all the cooking I do is super easy. I mean, anyone should be able to do it. Now, I want to talk about efficiency because that affects food service, that affects restaurants, that affects home cooks. A lot of people keep telling me whole grains take forever to cook. There is many things you can do. You can use quick cooking whole grains, which are on the table in about 15 minutes. I'm listing just a few of them here, and of course many of them are gluten-free. They're here at the bottom, for example, buckwheat, millet, quinoa, amaranth. These are already really fast in 15 to 20 minutes. Quick cooking with gluten would be frike, farro, you probably had in some trendy restaurant. Bulgur, it's called ancient fast food for a reason, classic Mediterranean staple, because people also always were busy. It's not like we invented being busy, right? Like, I mean, my Greek grandmother and my mom, they were cooking our laundry as children on a pot because they didn't have laundry machines. I'm just saying this because, we keep telling, and I keep complaining about being too busy all the time. So it's not like I don't know it, but I'm just always saying. So if you're busy during the week, use quick cooking grains. If you're have time, and this applies to restaurants as well and food service, and it's really important, right? You don't need to just make like a little amount of wheat berries, like soak them and cook them, and then like, oh my God, one meal. No, you make a huge amount at the start of the week, on the weekend or whatever it fits in your schedule, and then you use these throughout, and you can create incredible things. You have some spelt berries in the fridge. You come back from the farmer's market, make a fresh salad, add some spelt berries to it, and suddenly you have a full, nourishing meal. Top it with cheese or with leftover chicken, whatever. You can do the same thing. You have roasted vegetables, either leftover or you make them fresh. Reheat everything in the microwave, add some spelt with it that you have in the fridge that you had made ahead. You have another meal, right? You can add them to a soup. You can add them to a stew, the cooked grain berries. How long will whole grain berries last if you made them ahead? Up to 7 days in the fridge, no problem. You can freeze them. You can freeze them like forever. I mean, I shouldn't say that really. I'm a home cook, so I guess I could say it. But it really, I've never had a frozen grain go bad in the freezer, really. It's not like fish or something these are staples. These are durable. These are, that's why we survived as humans. So that's something that is very hard still for people to grasp, how easy it is. So I always say, if you have a large amount of grains that you've made ahead, then basically you're all set. You can do a lot with it. Now, I want to talk about cost because that's a huge issue also. Has anyone ever cooked a pound of whole grains? It's going to make you about how much was it? 8 cups, about 16 servings of grains. So, I mean, the cost, when you compare this to meat or fish, so I advocate a new balance for our plate. And I'm inspired by the peasant diet that, my family in Greece, until very recently, used to eat before they became wealthy, right? And that means we have a much smaller animal protein on our plate, like chicken or fish or meat. And we have a quarter of our plate, which is also what the Harvard School of Public Health recommends. A quarter of our plate should be whole grains. And then, of course, we have a lot of vegetables. And vegetables, of course, are also, part of the Mediterranean diet. That's something that, again, I was raised on. That's how I cook. There's lots of vegetables in the dishes, but no one ever said you have to eat them. So, so I'll get back to this towards the end of the talk. But so in terms of cost, if you're like a school or a restaurant or a food service, if you cut down on the animal protein and add grains, I mean, you can add high-quality organic grains to it, which I prefer because you're eating literally the whole grain, so I prefer to use organic. I prefer even to use local. We're going to have a talk by Stephen Jones about local wheat tomorrow morning, which I look forward to. I advocate local grains, which we have, which are now being grown all across, like in many parts of the U.S., for example, in Massachusetts, where I am now. If you've had a local barley, for example, it's so phenomenal in terms of flavor. It cooks so much faster. It's typically so fresh because it's from the last harvest. How do I know how long my barley was on the shelf in the store? I don't. I advocate also that we label grains when they were harvested, just like with olive oil we do it now, and that we have when they were harvested and when they taste best. So I want to talk about that affects our cooking every day as well. I want to talk about technique. So I constantly tinker with grains and try to help people make them cook faster because I do understand that that's one big problem. And you can do some things. For example, one thing that was really... It came because I remember reading about a recipe where you soak oats, steel-cut oats, overnight in boiling water. And so I thought, why can't we do this with other grains? And so I started tinkering. Well, it took 16 tests. It was actually quite exhausting. And to do the same thing for polenta, because I'm sure if you have anyone that's Italian with Italian roots, any Italian mama will tell you polenta needs to be stirred for at least 1 hour. Well, this polenta now, I call it shortcut polenta. I use it here in this breakfast polentina with strawberries. It's a very simple breakfast and poppy seeds and lime. This shortcut polenta that I created is ready when you soak it at night with boiling water in the morning in about 10 minutes. So, I mean, it's for me, it was a game changer. When you have guests or something, there's no trouble anymore. I mean, 10 minutes, you can do that a few times stirring a pot. That's, suddenly you have 100% whole grain cornmeal if you use that, and it's accessible. Now, the environmental footprint, and that ties in that you mentioned. I wrote last year a story for the Washington Post, and that is actually related to the balance of the plate that I talked about, the new balance that I would like to see. The story was titled, "Your Grain-Free Diet Isn't Natural, Good for You, or Good for the Planet." The inspiration for that was California and the drought. We also in Massachusetts now had a whole summer, I think 2 months with drought. We had no rain. And I started really wondering how we can advocate, diets that have huge pieces of meat, again, on our plates. And of course, this includes the diets, like paleo, for example, and similar regimens that are simply not sustainable. Now, as an example, I'm going to just use one example because the article is online, and I'd be happy to send it to you. For 1 pound of beef it requires 1,850 gallons of water to produce. The same amount of rice, about 300. And rice, I call it the gas guzzler of grains. If you start thinking about grains that are now also being grown in the US that are drought tolerant, like millet, that are now grown in the US, like teff, sorghum, and of course millet, which I hope will be trending. It's a delicious, quick cooking grain. And if you think about those, they use even less water, of course. And if we just reduce. I'm also just like Anne. I eat meat, I eat fish, but it's very small portions. And I think, it's better for us, for our health. It's better for the planet. And so I would love to see more of that. Now, I want to leave you with the topic of health with which I started. I have an essay in my book that's titled Just Don't Call It Healthy. Now, why did I write this essay? Whenever you mention grains, it's the only food group where healthy is really the only thing that people know. I mean, that's why I mentioned the party that I mentioned at the start. Whole grains are always healthy. That's all we have been saying. And so I came across some research a few years ago. It was published in Eating Well. That just blew me away. And if I give people a chocolate bar that's protein-rich, super healthy. I mean, I forgot the attributes that they used, right? But it was basically a healthy chocolate bar, and I gave them a mouth-watering, very tasty chocolate bar. After eating the chocolate bar, the group of people that had the healthy chocolate bar felt more hungry even than the group that had no chocolate bar. If that doesn't make you think what we've done to the word healthy in America, and I can say this because I'm German and Greek, and we don't eat things because they're healthy. We just eat them because they're tasty. So I want to send you home with that because I want to send you all home and to never say healthy whole grains again. I mean, that's really my passion, to think about the color, the texture, and the flavors of grain, and to start really adding them to your menus, to your diet, to your own diet, and to explore them and see the wide range that they bring to our table. And I don't know where I am time-wise because I can... Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, so I want to leave it at that. Just one last thing before I... Incidentally, I know there is a session here about pairing whole grain pasta. Well, I guess a lot of people have the same ideas. In the current Fine Cooking, there's a few issues outside. There is a story that I wrote, How to Learn to Love Whole Grain Pasta. And it talks exactly about texture and how to pair it and the flavor of the pasta that you use. It introduces also beautiful new whole grain pastas that are on the market in the US. So I hope you get inspired. Thank you.
Questions? Comments? You're never going to say the H word again, right?
Hi, I'm Robin with Riceland in Stuttgart, and a lot of times people don't have 45 minutes to cook whole grain brown rice. And I was intrigued when you talked about soaking the grain overnight in boiling water. What are some of the grains that you used, and did you try that with brown rice? Because if you didn't, I am going to try that.
There's actually a lot. Also in my first book, I have actually a technique where I parboil the brown rice, which is also a great technique that I use, and where you basically parboil it, stick it either in the fridge again or in the freezer, and then it cooks in 10 or 15 minutes, just like white rice, right? So that's another option that I tested. So the reason why I didn't do this for all grains is because I'm alone. I am literally alone in my test kitchen. So if I had a team of people, I would love to test it for all grains and make it consistent. I did it for black rice. I did it for amaranth. It didn't work with all grains, but you never know, because I've done also funny things. Brown rice, for example, something I very often do, I turn it on, like, let's say, on the weekend, for example, before I go for a walk, I turn it on, I cook it for 2 minutes. If you have really good grains, and this is what we can talk about more, what are good whole grains, right? Because there's a wide range of them. If you have good quality, fresh whole grains, it is possible that this 2-minute cooking and you walking, going for half hour, 45 minutes away and coming back, that your rice will be ready. So I've had these, but only if the rice is fresh. So just to finish this off, it's a very good question. Tell me what you find out. I mean, anyone, like I could use a lot of help. I would love to help people because that's what I want people to do, right? I really want to get it on our table fast. I mean, that was the idea also for the second book that I wrote. I shared all the tricks in Simply Ancient Grains that I use basically to make it possible, but I'm sure we can find a lot more. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Jones. I just want to compliment you on two things. I thought your talk was beautiful.
Thank you.
The one is that we didn't invent busy. My Polish grandmother cleaned houses for a living in Brooklyn, 3 per day, and she baked bread every night. So I don't buy that we're so busy. I just don't. The other one that you said is that very good food is cheaper than very bad food. And I'm paraphrasing what you said, but if we cook and bake ourselves, it's much more economical. And I think that's a message to carry forward is you're a home cook, I'm a home cook. I think more people should be home cooks. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add to this, thank you, Steve, to add to this is it applies to the home cook, but it also applies actually to a busy restaurant kitchen, because what I earlier said, if you make, 2 or 3 grains, that's what I sometimes do. I cook a large pot of this grain and a large pot of this grain or beans or lentils, and then I have it. I mean, it lasts. I mean, that's the wonderful thing. Or stick it in the freezer if something happens, right? If you go to a restaurant 3 days a week, so, which a lot of people do, right? And so it's just you have to learn it, right? Like I've used also in the new book, for example, I put a table to help people. I mean, it took me forever. It was crazy to create this table. To basically show people this is what you can do when you have a pot of spelt, or this is what you can do. Then there were all the recipes that they can do from the book, because I thought once you've tried this once, you're going to be so creative in your own kitchen, you'll never need that table again, right? But you need the inspiration. You need to understand that once. And this is what I'm trying to do. So thank you.
Any other final questions? I don't think Maria's going to take no for an answer. We're all going to have to go home and cook, and I think we've been very inspired by this.
Yes, and you have to, whatever you figure out with quick cooking grains and make them even faster, please. I welcome it. I would be delighted. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So if Maria's beautiful photographs and the descriptions didn't make you hungry, this next session will.